Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 171 with Samuel Longbottom. He is a boat builder, and he came on the podcast specifically to talk about sobriety. And we talked about his journey through addiction, specifically alcohol addiction, and why it's beneficial to kind of put down the booze and try to work through that and some of the after effects of the addiction. It was a really powerful episode. You can check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you want to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So that brings me to episode 172 with Hope Shanley.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Glad we could set this podcast up. I got to give the shout outs to Wally from the Ever Changing Vibe. Got to give some shout outs to Sean Rivers and as well as Billy G.
All my people.
Yeah, we kind of have this little network of guests that we've kind of been sharing and doing different podcasts with.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we were able to set up today, and especially considering you just dropped a song.
Yes.
I know you didn't do it on purpose, but it works out really perfectly for doing content and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to get into some of your music.
Yeah.
We're going to get into some stuff about faith, maybe some social media stuff.
Cool.
But I'd like to open the podcast with a little bit, well, before I get to the family dynamic, just quick little thing about who you are and what you're doing currently.
All right. Well, my name is obviously, like we said, I think, Hope Shanley.
Yeah.
I'm from Massachusetts. I'm pursuing a country music career. I'm a Christian. I'm a worship leader at my church. I play the guitar. I'm pretty much, I don't know, I'm just me in all forms, for sure. But I guess to everyone, I am a country singer and a Christian. So those are my two biggest things I think about me. And I'm just going with the flow right now and releasing music whenever it comes to my heart and hoping that people like it.
Yeah, and we'll get into more as we go through the podcast about that specifically.
Mhm.
So how I like to open up the podcast, I like to talk about family dynamic and talk about the reason why I talk about family dynamic. So when we're talking about your life story here, we're talking about everything that goes from the beginning all the way up. And how I like to picture it is I always use this kind of corny cliche of when you're talking about building a house, we talk about the foundation first.
Mhm.
And our childhood, our upbringing is that foundation. And I find it important to at least touch on a little bit just to see where everyone comes with, because everyone has different family dynamics. So with whatever you're comfortable with sharing, I'll let you kind of take the floor and we'll dive into this a little bit.
Okay, so just how I grew up, my
Yeah,
family.
yeah. However much detail you want to give,
Okay.
feel comfortable do that.
So I grew up with, so I have so my parents have been divorced since I was 4 years old. So I've grown up with, separate households. I have an older sister, an older brother, and an older half brother. But I mean, I don't like to call them my half brothers and sisters. So yeah, I grew up, with the normal, I guess, I don't know if I should say normal, but dynamics of living under divorced parents, the struggles that obviously come with that. Um, it's hard to vaguely go over it all, but I will say that that definitely has been like a core factor in just what has built my character and things that I've gone through and learned from, and examples that were, made and set and stuff to learn from or, strive for. So yeah, I guess it wasn't a picture perfect growing up for sure. I'm sure nobody has that, but we'll say it definitely made me pretty tough and definitely learned a lot. And it's still something that sometimes is hard for me, not from the divorce itself, but because when a family is broken in forms, there is a lot of aftermath to that. Um, and not to say that it's anyone's fault. I don't like to put the blame on anyone, but there definitely is a lot of consequence from that, and it's definitely been very apparent in my upbringing, but it would not change a thing, and I'm very grateful for both my parents and my siblings, and I think that we've all grown so much, thank God. And I just think that the older that we get a little bit closer too. So yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate you being willing to dive into this too, because
yeah,
it's obviously not the easiest thing to one start off a podcast with, and two, it's your family, it's personal. So
right.
like, obviously, we don't go into the crazy details here without people's permissions, obviously. But I
Hmm.
think talking about that family dynamic and the structure is valuable because I have people from different walks of life who come from different backgrounds, and I think it's always important to hit on the fact of like how different the structures can be. Like obviously
Yeah.
for me, my parents were together; they're still together to this day,
Hmm.
and that definitely allowed me opportunities to succeed in different areas that not everyone is privileged to get. And I've actually been
Yeah.
able to appreciate that more and more as I've done the podcast, from people being willing to open up about this stuff, because it is obviously, like I said, personal.
Right.
But it's important to acknowledge this when we're talking about your life, obviously, because it plays a huge factor in how you grew
Hmm.
up. And I just like always want to appreciate people for being willing to talk about that, because it's not an easy thing to
Yeah.
to dive into.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As we kind of walk through like some of your childhood stuff,
Mhm.
let's dive into a little bit with like sports, hobbies, kind of things you did to make friends, maybe stuff that you enjoyed when you were growing up, and we'll dive into some of that stuff.
Yeah. I never did sports. Um, I think maybe if I had the opportunity more, I would have. Um, I don't know, it was always just like, "Oh, we don't have the money," or just don't even it wasn't really a question. So, I mean, I've been singing as long as I can remember, so naturally I've been artistic, and usually you see, like, a kid going one way or the other, I feel like. But to me, I feel like you know, definitely am athletic in certain ways and also very artistic and enjoy being active and stuff. So it was just, like at home gymnastics and dancing around the kitchen and the front yard and um, just making fun out of whatever we had. And yeah, I don't know what I would say I did to make friends.
We could dive into the music stuff. So did that start at like a really early age?
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, people always ask me like, "When did you start singing?" I'm like, "As long as I can remember," but I just have like a core memory from when I think I was 8 years old, and I was like singing on the school bus, and someone was like, "You sound good, sing that for my friend," and I was like, "Okay," and um yeah, so from that point on, I just remember, like I feel like I don't know, I just feel like I was, like, born with it, like, I just, like, always, like, knew I could sing even before I could comprehend it, before I even really, like, knew how to open my mouth, you know? I don't know, because it never was like, "Oh my god, it just came out of my mouth," like, it's just like, yeah, I sang, like, I don't know. Um, so yeah, as long as I could remember, I've been singing, and I picked up the guitar/ukulele slash ukulele when I was, like, 12 or 13. Um, then I like couldn't really actually play it. It took a few years, learned the ukulele, and then picked up guitar and then explored, piano and stuff like that. So I'm like very mediocre at like a lot of little things. But the only sport I've ever done was I did field hockey freshman year in high school. And but I will say I spent a lot of time. I still love basketball outside like my apartments. We had a basketball hoop, and now we actually have a half court, so it's nice. But like I grew up playing basketball with the neighbors and stuff, with the guys down the street and stuff. So that's about as sporty as I got.
Big into like Celtics basketball at all, or do you just like the sport, just playing the sport a
I
little bit?
mean, I definitely don't follow sports that much, but I do enjoy it when I watch it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
So,
What's We're getting a little kickback on the mic, so you could
oh,
put your
sorry.
Stanley up there. I don't really care about if it blocks
My
a little.
fake Stanley.
You didn't have to expose yourself like that. I was trying to do you a solid. It doesn't sound bad, but I didn't want to go the whole
Thanks
podcast
for
and do
telling
do
me
you
that.
that.
No, don't worry.
And I don't want to disrupt the TikTok live that we have going on here. Shout out to the listeners on TikTok. Um, but yeah, with the music stuff, that sounds really great. That it kind of was just natural to you. And like,
Mm,
you didn't take any lessons, did you?
no. I did my first singing lessons last year, but we really focused on marketing more because she was like, "Oh, you can already sing." So I was like, "Okay."
Did you
That's
ever
really
like
fun.
perform it at school at all, and like any like talent shows or anything, where
Um,
you're just kind of like,
I think the earliest age I like performed was maybe it was 6th grade. I did like one thing where I like sang "This Girl Is on Fire" by Alicia Keys. And I remember I was like, I can't believe I just did that. And we were like dancing, we had this whole choreography, and it was like me and my friend. And then after that, I did like the 8th grade talent show a couple times. And I think once I was like 13, 14, I was, did a few open mics and stuff. It was like the scariest puke my brains out thing I've ever done. Like, and I kept doing it, but it was still terrifying. So that's when I guess I started kind of going in front of people.
did you ever have like bad performances when you're doing that? Because like I can imagine that
Yeah.
was kind of scary, especially early on.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like, it's weird, like, cause I obviously, like, everyone has nerves, I feel like, but mine were, like, bad, which is weird because going into it, I'm not scared of the actual, like, happening of it. Like, I'm like, "Okay, I know that I can sing, I know that I can do this, like, nobody wants me to fail," like, mentally, like, there's no issue. But whenever I got on the stage, it's like I just, like, black out, and, like, my whole body sends tingles, and, like, all of a sudden, like, my voice cracks anytime I open it, and, like, so to me, it was like every time I got up in front of people, it was, like, the worst experience, like, imaginable. But then I'd get, applause and compliments after and all this stuff, and I'm like, I would just, like, run and cry because it was like, "Oh my god," I like, it just was the worst feeling. But I will say, every single time that I got back up and did it again, it got, like, slightly better. Slightly, slightly, slightly. And now, I still get nerves a little bit, but, like, now, I can get up on stage without thinking about it, and it's fun, and, like, I'm like, "Psh." I knew that it would just take a certain amount of times to get to the point where, like, I just don't feel that way anymore, and
Yeah, it's the repetition of it.
yeah.
I think that's very important to hit on, especially when you're getting into music or trying to get into any like type of content too, or a sport or the gym. It's the repetition aspect of doing the
Mhm.
thing. And it sounds, especially for getting in front of people, was like obviously one of those big hurdles for you early on, because obviously if anyone listens to her music, it's very good. um you had the voice, you knew you had the voice. It was just getting the confidence behind
Yeah.
being on stage in front of people, because like
Mhm.
you said, you were getting the applause. It was
Yeah.
just that factor of being on the stage. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that. It's traditional stage fright almost, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was so bizarre, and I almost, like, still can't wrap my head around it because I realized I wasn't actually nervous of what I was doing. I was nervous that I would get nervous because I knew what happened when I got nervous. I got shaky. I couldn't even, like, I was, like, out of my body, like, I just felt like I could not sing at all. I couldn't sing. And, like, all those mistakes that I felt like I made, like, half the time people didn't notice, but, like, to me, it was, like, the end of the world, and so I was like, "How the heck do I get over my fear of being fearful?" Like, it makes no sense, but it's just I always like to say that I am, like, way too self-aware, and it scares me, and it's, like, a vicious cycle because I know myself too well, and then it just puts me in more trouble, like
I totally, as someone who likes to try to preach self-awareness,
Yeah.
like that is the danger of self-awareness, is
Yeah.
actually being too aware to the point where
Psych
it can
myself
be, yeah,
out,
it can
yeah.
be crippling.
Yeah.
And I've gone through that, and like I've even had to work through some of that stuff in therapy, is where like, you did something wrong, but you accept that it's wrong, but you don't care that you did it was wrong, and you're just like, yeah, that was wrong. I won't do it again, but I'm not sorry that I did it this way. And
Right,
it's like, yeah, but I also know that that thought process isn't healthy as well, and
right.
it's like you just keep spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, and
Yeah,
it's this constant cycle that's not actually truly healthy and
Yeah.
represents what self-awareness should be.
Right.
Self-awareness should be acknowledging kind of the things that you do right and wrong and
Mhm.
what you should be better at and stuff like that, not to the point where you're spinning in circles inside your head trying
Yeah.
not to black out during when you're
Yeah.
singing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's like a crazy concept, but I think it hits on the point though that you're very self-aware with where you are in your talent, and especially at an early age. It sounds like that you were pretty confident in your singing ability, but getting the experience in front of people was something that you had to work through.
Mhm.
So as you went through kind of the rest of middle school and high school, did you start thinking that this could possibly turn into a career?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, since I mean, I can't tell you like how far back the dream goes. Again, like I said, it always was just like an innate feeling. But, up until I was, I think like like a senior in high school, up until then, it was kind of like a hidden, squashed dream. Like everyone like knew it, but like we couldn't talk about it because it was like, oh no, but Hope's gonna go to college and Hope's no, yeah, but she'll always be a singer, but she's gonna, do real world stuff. And like I was like, uh-huh, yep, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna sit in an office. Like that is not me, that's just not who I am. And so I always just had to like follow that script um, a little bit, more just from obviously societal standards, but also like my mother, adjusting to the reality of what I was pursuing. And it's now real for her. And she has, now she's one of my biggest supporters, and my dad too. And but yeah, so it was kind of like everyone knew, and she knew my heart and my passion for it. And like we would sit down and watch, Taylor Swift marathons, and she'd be like, that's gonna be you, that's you. And I'm like, I know, like. And so it's like we'd like talk about it, and then we'd like put it under the rug. And then it was when I went to South Carolina and got inspired. And my followers have probably heard me talk about this a bunch of times, but just like I saw this band that was really cool, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this, like for real. And I was like, I can't go to college. I can't. And that's why I wrote Blood Run Zebra, Mama, I don't want to go to college. And that was my first country single. And it's my biggest hit. And that's how I told my mom I wasn't going to college. And so from there on out, it was like, we're doing this, and it's taken a lot of adjusting. But now it's like what everyone knows me for. So yeah, it's like I gotta do it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty powerful
Yeah.
to turn that moment into music.
Yeah.
Like to be able to kind of use that song as your way to kind of be like, yeah, I'm not gonna follow the traditional path because like obviously with the flow of the conversation, the next question would have been like why or why not go to college. So I kind of want to know a little bit what was that initial conversation like when and how difficult was it to kind of let her know or let your family know in general that college isn't for me?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't really know what maybe my siblings thought. I think they probably were like, yeah, no shot, she's going to college. But, you know, I would like kind of privately talk to my dad and be like, "Are you with me on this?" Like, cause like, listen, like I know I can do this. Like, whatever it means. Like, even if this singing stuff doesn't work out, like I remember I sat down with him. We went and got wings or something, and I was like, I was so passionately talking to him. I was like, Dad, like, whatever it takes, whatever it means, I know that I can walk into somewhere and get a job. Wherever it is, whatever it means, I will do it. Like I know that I can. It's like things are just literally at the palm of your hands. Like if you just go and do something, you can, I know how to talk to people. Like I will survive. I will be fine regardless. Like I can't go to college. I can't. I was like, I know I'll be fine. And he's like, yeah, I agree with you, basically. And I was like, okay. And then it was like, I forget if this was before or I think it must have been after I wrote the song. And I don't remember if my mom had already listened to it or not. But even after I showed her the song and it was released and everything, and it took her like probably 2 months or something to like really understand what was going on. So there wasn't everyone asked me, "Oh, how did your mom respond and what was that conversation like?" And I'm like, like we've had just several conversations over the course of a few months, and even to this day. So it's like it was a gradual process. It wasn't as romanticized as the song made it, but um yeah, it just took a lot of patience and talking and understanding, and like, now we can kind of laugh about it in hindsight, like mom, this whole like, come on, you knew I wasn't, like so
Yeah, because it's
yeah.
part of as you were talking about, like, the societal pressures of
Yeah.
college and the expectation of parents
Right.
for their children to go to college. Because obviously, I would say it's definitely changed in the last like 5 to 6 years,
Mhm.
where the narrative was always go to college, get the degree,
Yeah.
and you'll be fine. And now people are kind of awakening to the fact that we've kind of been sold a false dream,
Yeah.
that a lot of people are suffering that have degrees that aren't even working in the careers that they went for, crippling student loan debt,
Mhm.
like all these expectations force a lot of kids, including myself, to go to college to pursue stuff. And you're 18 signing a loan that could be anywhere from 10, 20, 30, up to $100,000 by
Oh
the end of
yeah.
it. And you don't know about interest rates. You don't know about any of that stuff. Luckily, I eventually learned about it in my career field with accounting finance. And um, I obviously, if I wasn't good at budgeting, that'd be a problem as an accountant. I was able to budget and I paid off my student loans
Yeah.
this summer, and like I'm done with them. They're gone.
Nice.
And but I know most people aren't like me. Most people aren't aware of this. Most people can't afford to do that either.
Mhm.
Obviously, I've had a lot of situations that have allowed me opportunity to do that, and I've been able to put aside money to pay for that. But that's part of the issue in society. So I think it's really great that one, at least your dad was very supportive about the concept and the belief in you to do that. And I think
Mhm.
that's really huge when you're trying to begin something that is kind of a little bit daunting at first. Like to
Yeah.
say that you're going to be a country singer, you're going to pursue music. That's kind of scary to like say at first, to just
Yeah.
kind of admit to the world, to yourself. Like obviously you probably knew it internally, but to kind of start speaking it and to obviously face some pushback from people.
Mhm.
Like
Oh yeah.
I could feel that in the way that when I first thought about doing podcasts, people were like, what the fuck are you gonna do a podcast for?
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna talk about?
Mhm.
And I always like to reference my second episode with my late grandfather, James Carroll Sr. He was the one of the first people to just buy into it. Was
Mm.
like, that's really cool. Like I remember I was telling you a little bit about my journey to do the podcast. When I came back from Georgia, I had lunch with him
Mm.
before my cousin's like football game, like a JV game. And I told him about everything I was gonna do, and I wanted him to be like a guest on, and he was so down. And at that point, he was just diagnosed with brain cancer at the time,
Mm.
so he was very introspective on the podcast. And I got to capture, I didn't realize at the time, but I got to capture the most beautiful podcasts that I have to this day.
Mm.
And I even got his quote tattooed on me, take a chance, because his advice basically was, if you're not doing something that you love or you want to try something different, to take that chance, to take
Yeah.
that leap of faith, because you don't want to live with the regret
Regret.
of not trying. And I've
Mm.
kind of bought into the idea that I'd rather live with the failure of trying than the regret of not. And I think that's a powerful message for
Yeah,
people
for
that want to
sure.
pursue stuff. And I think what you're doing with your music is honestly so amazing, especially at the age that you're starting with, because that's like the hardest time to do it,
Yeah.
especially with the pressures of college, like you're saying.
Mhm.
That's like that's a lot to kind of handle. So how did you kind of start pivoting after like you graduated? What was kind of the process to start, like obviously you wrote the song and stuff, but how did you start pursuing the career per se?
Let me go back. Um, I think it was just a lot of writing and like running to the studio, and um, once your focus changes, you need to surround your eyes and ears and yourself with that. So whether that means social media, or um, who you surround yourself with or whatnot, like those were all factors. And I talk about this a lot. It was more than just a switch to country music. Um, but it was kind of like almost an epiphany I had in life. So it was like, okay, no, this is this is who I'm gonna be, because I wasn't myself, and I was like really identified with principles of country music, and that affected me in more ways than, you know, just how I was presenting my music or my style or whatever. Like it changed, it was a maturity thing for me, and it was like, okay, this is who you are. Like stop fighting it. And so it was that. It was like how I was acting, who I was surrounding myself with. Um, I spiced up my style a little bit, but I will say it definitely, like I said, you need to, when you change your focus, it's important to do that also on social media. So, like, my demographic had to change, my focus had to change. So, like a week after, I'm like all excited about this new stuff. Like, everything on my feed is like country, 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 country. Like, I had to filter through all my followers, and follow people I wanted to be looking up to and getting inspired by. And you need to like literally be a sponge and absorb as much possible like insight and information from whatever niche you're trying to pursue. So that's what I immediately did. And then you become that. And so that, along with just writing and writing and writing, and I was like, damn, like writing country songs is fun, and like this is so easy, and like I can just do it. And I've had this guitar this whole time, why haven't I been using it? And so I just like ran to the studio with all these songs, and they're pretty trash looking at them now, but like, so everyone adjusted to it, and they're like, I was the only country singer at the studio, and they're like, what the heck? But um yeah, it was just like coming up with as many songs as I could, and not even really intentionally, it was just flowing out of me. And so just all of that at once just like invented this new Hope Shanley, and it's been pretty cool since. So
Yeah, I think you're doing a fantastic job of like recreating or were recreating who you were to who you are now. And I think you need to do that when you're pursuing something.
Mm,
I like to reference a similar point when I was talking about this podcast when I created it. I had to like push back on people of when I moved back home, they wanted to put me back in that box of who I was.
yeah.
That's you can't allow that. You have to be that new person authentically all the time, and you have to just kind of like insert that
Mhm.
personality. Like this is what I do. I podcast, like I talk to people, I promote mental health. Like this is my thing now.
Mhm.
And you have to believe it.
Yeah.
Like if you don't believe it, no one else is going to buy into it. Like
Yeah.
I can imagine if you wanted to do it and you were kind of like somewhat nervous, your dad might have been a little bit more hesitant with like being, "Hey, maybe you should look at this." But
Mhm.
being so passionately down for it definitely inspires other people to believe in you, because like
Yeah.
that belief is what fires everybody up and
Mhm.
helps push the momentum, because momentum's real. If you get that momentum pushing in the right direction, good things do happen. And I think that's what you've created. And you might say those original songs are trash, but it's part of the journey. Like I look back at
Right.
my first
Oh,
few
yeah.
episodes, they're trash, they're
Yeah.
terrible. But like in hindsight, are they really trash, or are they really part of the learning process of figuring out
Yeah.
how to podcast?
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
figuring out how to produce and write your own music and publish it. That's part of the process. Like
Mhm.
it's trash to us as creators, but those are going to be the most valuable pieces as we start to age and grow with our content,
Yeah.
because we get to reflect on how far we've come with it. And I can only imagine the maturity stuff, the maturity growth you probably feel going through this process over
Mhm.
writing all these different songs, feeling all these different experiences, and then turning those experiences into songs as well.
Yep.
What were some of your inspirations to start writing? Like I know you mentioned Taylor Swift a little bit.
Yeah.
What are kind of Jesus? What are some of your inspirations with the music?
Um, I think Taylor definitely has always been a big inspiration for me in the way that she is just so to the point. And I will say, between, I wasn't introduced to like Johnny Cash until, recent years. I shouldn't say introduced, but taken an ear to. So like growing up with Taylor, I think between Taylor and Miley, um, like I've just always kind of identified with them, and I don't know, I just always saw myself in them in different ways. And of course I grew up with that just all in front of my face, and all the girls probably wanted to be them. But I will say that Miley's confidence and her kind of like silly personality definitely has always reminded me of myself. And then the way that Taylor writes, how she's like a little bit quirky, a little bit out there, a little daring, and like will just say the thing. Like she'll throw someone's name in there, or she'll throw like the exact thing that happened. So I was like, that's cool because I would so do that, and I do. So I think she's definitely always been an inspiration to me, and just how she handles herself also. And then the way that Johnny tells stories and is again just blunt is very inspirational to me. And like when I tell you I am not at all where I want to be with writing, it's definitely a struggle a lot of times, but and I don't know if any of that is reflected in my writing yet, but definitely like, Taylor, Johnny Cash, even I'm trying to learn more poetry style like Zach Bryan and stuff. So yeah, I just try to kind of take it all in from all different aspects, but Taylor's always been my girl for sure.
I definitely see it's almost like the combination of Taylor and Miley, now that you say that. Like I definitely can hear it in the music and almost like visually, like kind of like the
Mhm.
mix between the two. I'm like, yeah, the vibe and the energy, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of get that, honestly. Like
Yeah,
growing up, obviously Hannah Montana was like such a big thing. I even
yeah.
watched it, I can't lie. But like I mean obviously Taylor Swift has been more in the limelight the last several years, especially with like the Travis Kelce Super Bowl
Mhm.
situation. So like I definitely see that comparison and that inspiration in what you do. And I think those are two great artists to emulate when you're trying to pursue this endeavor of country music, because
Mhm.
there's both pieces that you could take from both of them and their careers and apply it and learn from them.
Yeah.
And what you said about the bluntness, I think that is so key in whatever you do, is
Mhm.
because it goes back to the authenticity of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Because if you're able to just say the thing,
Mhm.
people are going to respect you and relate to that.
Yeah.
Because most people won't say the thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's understandable with saying certain things, people are going to get offended by it, but sometimes it takes offending to actually create the art.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes you have to push the boundary, and
Mhm.
then maybe you touch the stove every once in a while, you get
Yeah.
burned. But it's getting ready to push that boundary further and further is what's going to make you a better artist. Because
Mhm.
if you just stay in the box, stay in the pocket, just write what you write and just stay there, comfortable, you're never going to grow to the places that you ultimately want to grow to. So pushing those boundaries and the bluntness, I thought those were so key as you were talking. I was like, wow, that like really resonated with me, because
Mhm.
I just start to think back of early in the podcast where I swear a lot and
Mhm.
I forget who exactly. I know my mom was one of them, was like, you should probably not swear as much. I'm just like, this is just like kind of who I am.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to water down my personality
Mhm.
to excuse me, dry throat, but water down who I am to fit a narrative.
Right.
So damn, hold on.
Water down.
Oh man, I was like choking right there. But like oh man, might have to edit this one out. I usually don't edit, but
That's okay.
I'm struggling right here.
That's alright.
But the point I was making with the bluntness is so key. And talking about the writing part and a little bit of the struggles with it. What's some of the process with writing? I know you referenced including stuff into that the writing process, but
Uh-huh.
where do you get your inspiration with writing?
So I think that's something that I am definitely learning a lot more recently is there is not always going to be inspiration, but when I do have inspiration, I almost don't even it doesn't feel inspiring until there's a product because the only time that I can truly like fully write a song is when I am like just like outraged with emotion or like having an actual mental breakdown or you know what I mean? Like there has to be a super overwhelming feeling for me to spit out a song. And pretty much every song that you see out on platforms by me was a result of that. Other than I think one song, Happily Ever After All, that I have out, that was the first co-write I did too, so a little different, but, like, that's the only song that I haven't just, like, breathed out and it just, like, came about kinda thing. 'Cause, like, I'll sit down and be like, "Oh, I can't get this out of my head. I need to write," and then I'll write it, and then it'll be done, and then I like run to the studio as soon as I can, um, and then it's just done. It's out there. And the rest of times when I am trying to write, it's never finished. It never is complete. It's either doesn't have music or it's like a weirdly rhymed poem or like makes absolutely no sense and like I couldn't tell you how many probably almost thousands of between notes and scrap paper and voice memos I have of like potential great songs, I don't know, that are just discarded because if I don't have that overwhelming feeling to get me through the song, like it's going to stay there until maybe I'll dig it up someday, I don't know. But for me, I've been in a very like a place more of like stillness, I guess, lately. So that's why I've been having a lot of writer's block, and so I'm trying to work through that and figure out how to write even when you have nothing to write about. There's always something to write about, but I think for songwriters, it's very real, learning how to just be disciplined in it and write even when you don't have the inspiration and don't have the passion. And I still struggle with it. I always will. But for me, that's how I write songs. I need to be, feeling it.
Yeah, have you heard of Russ, like the rapper?
Yes.
I like the way that he approached the music aspect was especially early on, writing and posting like a song a week, that discipline aspect, and slowly,
Yeah.
obviously he's independent. He really built his brand by himself to do it that way. And obviously the time period he was doing it was different. SoundCloud was like really popular back
Mhm.
then, and like he didn't have like the TikTok or the Vines, the
Right.
Instagrams that we do today. But I think him as an artist is a perfect person to kind of like look at when you're thinking about the writing craft, because
Mhm.
like not every one of those songs was a hit,
Right.
but it was to continually work the muscle. And I
Yeah.
think I've gone through that same process with podcasts. Sometimes you just don't want to do it. Sometimes it's just tough to schedule the people to edit the podcast, to
Mhm.
post it. It's sometimes can feel like a job, like it's frustrating,
Yep.
and it feels more like a job than a passion sometimes. But we kind of were talking about this like discipline, regimen aspect of things, and I think that is really key when you're working, especially whether it's writing or podcasting or going to the gym, whatever it is that constant doing the thing. You got
Mhm.
to keep doing the thing, because as soon as you start getting off of it, you're not going to want to do it. Might get a
Yeah.
little bit lazy,
It's hard.
and,
Yeah.
and I can imagine with writing too, you want those experiences to write about,
Mhm.
because those are going to be the easiest things to write about, especially if
Right.
it's like more of an emotional feel to it where you can kind of put it out there and you can
Mhm.
really feel it. Because I think for me, a lot of the music I resonate with typically would have been more sad stuff if I was going through something.
Right.
But for me, over the last several years, and I think what the direction you're going with country music is a great direction. I've even gone to more country. Obviously, moving to Texas kind of helped, but like
Mhm.
the vibe of it is just better.
Mm.
The sound of it's just better. You're hearing people actually sing
Yeah.
versus I was up brought up with like Lil Wayne and rapper like
Yeah.
Eminem, and like this is the Drake. This was like the generation of like rappers going up, and I was like kind of just sucked into it. And
Yeah.
then I mean I'm mainstream. I like Morgan Wallen. I like Luke Combs. I
Yeah.
like Zach Bryan. Trying to think of this. Mentioned Matt Schuster, this upcoming
Yeah.
TikTok artist. I think he
Mhm.
has real potential, but I think country is becoming what rap was
Oh, yeah.
several years ago.
Country's cool again.
Yeah,
Lainey
and it's
Wilson
coming
just
back.
wrote that song, yep.
I mean, look at Beyonce. She just dropped a country
Oh my
song. So
gosh,
like
yeah.
that you got that. You got artists looking at country, and I guess she's from Texas, so like I mean, I guess there's some influence there is what I was reading online, because people were obviously hating on it. But obviously the quote unquote beehive is all like this is great.
Yeah.
But I mean, even look at what Taylor Swift was. She really was country and
Mhm.
transitioned to a little bit more poppy kind of
Yeah.
feel,
Mhm.
and kind of flirts between the two
Right.
with her music. But I think the country genre is definitely where you want to be as an artist right
Yeah.
now, and I think obviously you have the voice for it, and the direction you're going is very positive. Switching gears a little bit with this, we were talking off podcast about religion, and
Yes.
a lot of you're talking some of your music is influenced a little bit with a little bit of religions. So, kind of talk to me a little bit about your religion, what you believe in, and I think it's great for people to listen to this type of stuff because I've
Yeah.
said on the podcast lately is what's missing in society right now is the faith or belief in something. And I think we were really having a great discussion off podcast, and I really
Mm.
wanted to bring this to the podcast. So if
Yeah.
you can go into it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Where to start? I will start off with, and I don't mean this in an offensive way to you. I hate the word religion for describing me personally.
I didn't want
I
to say the wrong religion.
no. I know. Everyone just calls it that because you wouldn't know any different. But I wanted to point that out because I recently was found a new way to say it, relationship. Because growing up, we never really liked using that word because we always felt like, religion was portrayed as like something. I need to actually look up the actual book definition, but it always felt like a rigid word with like rules and ceremonies, and it scared people and stuff. And so we just never really felt like that was what we followed, I guess. But I will say that I have a relationship with Jesus, and that I have a very strong faith in God, and I believe that, Jesus died for our sins, and I know that that's a huge concept. We don't have to get into all of that, but I will say that having a relationship with Jesus in my life has greatly built a foundation for me. And it doesn't make you perfect. It doesn't make you anything really. It's not actually about who we are, it's about who he is, and having a firm foundation to rely on. And regardless of everything that I have been through and messed up on and encountered, he has never left my side. And I really am terrified of the person I would be to this day if I didn't have God in my life. Because even with God in my life, I've done some pretty messed up stuff, and I've had the Lord in my life since I was, I think, 8 years old. And again, I know some people don't understand how you could maybe comprehend something that large at that young. But for me personally, I've just had that connection with the Holy Spirit since I was that young. And, I'm thankful that I grew up in the church. It's actually named after my church, New Hope. Um, and it's just made such a great difference in my life. And obviously, I can't remember much before I didn't have it in my life. Um, but I will say that principles and values and morals that I have come from that. And it affects how I love people, how I treat people, how I treat relationships. Forgiveness is huge. And just having purpose in life is so important. And I think that what so many people today lack is knowing their purpose in life. And, how are you supposed to know? You don't. Um, Maybe something works for you and you go with that. But, there's always going to be that void, I think, for people until you find, for me, like, I know who my creator is. I know that I was made beautifully in his image and that I have this strength because of him. And I would be, a shrub without him, really, realistically, because I know what I'm capable of and it ain't pretty, So without those boundaries and these um, morals and just having something that you're constantly trying to learn from, I think is just so important. And for me, I don't know what I would do without it, truthfully. And for anyone that knows me, knows I'm very far from perfect. Um, but I'm blessed to say that every day I wake up and I know that I have grace to start again and to be better than I was yesterday, and that I'm forgiven for whatever I did the day before, and that there will never be a record held for me, And I think that sorry to, maybe I'm going off a little bit, but I think that a lot of people maybe view God as someone who almost looks down on us, and like we should fear him in a different way than you think. But I think that we think of him as like someone who's like constantly holding a record on us and maybe judging us or something. But like the reality is God loves us, he made us, and he knows who we are better than we know ourselves. And I think when you come to terms with that, you develop such a lovely relationship with him, and you feel that love that you really can't get from people of the world, because it's just not possible, because we're all flawed and we sin, and that's just who we are. That's the earth that we live on. But being connected with someone, something that is much greater than we could ever be or imagine, is just really beautiful, and it's really changed my life.
Yeah, I want to thank you for being willing to talk about this, because I
Yeah.
know this is can be such a hot button topic for a lot of people, because that's just the way our world is these days.
Mhm.
But I think you're so right in the sense that a lot of people could really benefit from having these principles and morals. And I would even say a lot of what I was raised on with my faith was based on that.
Mm.
Um, I'm very lucky, and I've talked about this on different podcasts. My parents didn't force me into any specific
Yeah.
faith, and I was allowed to step away from it. And that's probably why I don't hold resentment towards it, as some
Mhm.
people might. But those beliefs in the higher power, the belief in that something is greater than myself, that we're working towards something positive. That's what kind of why I felt called to do this. Was I felt called to kind of connect with people, relate to people, talk to people on like a
Yeah.
personal level, because what I felt was lacking was empathy and sympathy for people. I've gone through my life where I didn't feel seen and heard in certain instances, and I wanted to give people the opportunity to talk about themselves in a way,
Mm.
to highlight the good things that we do, to highlight that we all have a story. And
Yeah.
that motivation ties into purpose. Because when I was moved away, I was very lacking of purpose. I didn't
Mm.
know what to believe, I didn't know who I was. And that causes a lot of darkness. And that can bring you into dark places to do dark things.
Yeah.
And to crawl out of that, some people never crawl out of that. So I consider myself lucky enough to have crawled out of a space to do that, but I never say you should believe in this or that. But
Mhm.
lately I felt called to kind of talk about
Mm.
whether you want to say spiritual or a specific type of
Beliefs.
belief.
Yeah.
There's just something that we need to unite people under, to kind of push our society forward in a positive way.
Mm.
Because obviously we introduce social media and the internet, and it's done some great things. We can't deny that, but it's also highlighted some of the nasty things about human nature
Yeah.
that we have come to see. And I think the thing that we really have needed was a conversation about faith, belief systems,
Mm.
what can unite people going
Right.
forward. And I think you've hit on some really great points with that, because it's it's those morals that keep people from doing those bad things. I know that
Right.
you kind of mentioned that a little bit.
Mm.
And some of the worst things that I've ever done was when I wasn't believing in anything, where I was
Mm.
just believing in that I'm the center of my universe, like I'm the
Right.
person. Like it's very selfish, it's very
Yeah.
narcissistic. And that's what our culture has pushed. Our culture has pushed a very individualistic.
Self-love.
Yeah, and that's actually a whole different tangent we
Yeah.
can get into, because as someone who represents mental health, yes, I believe you should love yourself. Yes, I should believe that concept. But people self worship is the problem.
Yeah.
And that is where you can bring in the faith aspect, is you are not God. Like that's
No.
and there's a lot of people on social media that you'll see that quite literally feel like they are.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a follower base
Yeah.
to validate why they feel that way, to be
Mhm.
honest. But I think even someone like, could be a stretch because I don't know as a person, but someone like Taylor Swift,
Mm.
like, doesn't come across as someone who is a god or a goddess or whatever you want
Yeah.
to say. She doesn't have that persona about her. She has a
Right.
huge following, but it's
Right.
that's not who she is.
Right.
And I think that's a obviously, like I said, I don't know her, but I think that's a good example to kind of highlight there
Yeah.
with faith. How does faith tie into the music? How does it inspire your music in any way?
I think that a big part of my purpose is to sing. Um, it's like the whole realm of my being. So I think that, I mean, obviously, I've, like I don't know if I said this off podcast or not, but I've been a worship leader singing at my church for I think maybe 6 years. So I do definitely use music to worship the Lord also. Um, but what I have learned is even when I'm not singing just worship music, it still can glorify God and be for, your purpose and his plan for you. So I think that if it's genuine and coming from my heart, that still is for his glory. And yeah, it definitely ties into like just the heart that he gave me, it's who I am. I'm someone with a very deep intellectual, emotional being, and that obviously pours into my writing and being so attached with music. And so I do believe that he's given me certain gifts to be able to do what I love and hopefully, that it would affect other people in a positive way. And so I'm still trying to navigate, what kind of music he wants me to make and what, to touch on specifically. But I will say that me having, I think, such a big and deep heart goes into my music. I hope it is portrayed that way. And that's the heart that he gave me. And that's just who I am. So, yeah. And anytime that I feel like, there are definitely some songs where I mention my faith, like faith in the way God made me. I think I said in Blood Runs Deeper. Um, yeah, it's just like he gives me the strength, he gives me the faith, he gives me the heart that I have, and that all ties into my music.
Yeah, I think trusting that he's guiding you on a path that's best for you
Yeah,
is such a fantastic belief to have too, because at the end of the day, you always know you're going to be okay.
right.
And I've always said that I said that, I don't know if it was last podcast, the one before, is that I have that belief within myself, no matter what, no matter how things go.
Yeah.
I know I'm a good person. I know things will be okay.
Mhm.
I know I work hard. I know I do the right thing when I can.
Right.
And I think like I said, a lot of those beliefs stem from my faith when I was a
Mhm.
child and those things that I was taught early on. And I think a lot of people's morals in general are stemmed from whether it's Christianity or some type of maybe other faith. I've started to stay away
Mhm.
from the word religion now, and now I'm gonna try to be more cautious of that.
No, you could
No,
hold
I
up.
think it's appropriate though, because there is a negative connotation on the word religion
Yeah.
inherently.
Which I don't think is how it originally is, but I
Even
don't want you to
no-
be afraid to say
no,
that
even
to
nowadays
anyone.
though, but even nowadays though, in general too, people do get like triggered almost when you bring up
Yeah,
religion or something
true.
religious.
True.
And like I was talking to my last guest, Sam, on the podcast last week about Islam and how it's like I can appreciate their their faith in the way that they believe what they believe. They
Yeah.
stick by it, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. They believe what they believe, and I can
Mhm.
respect that.
Right.
And no one tries to mess with their God or their religion. And like on some level, I can respect that
Yeah.
as a person, that your foundation, your fundamental beliefs are what you truly believe, and you stick by them. Obviously, there's gonna be outliers that sin and do what they want to do, and
Right.
that they claim that they're religious and they believe what they believe. But I'm not talking about those people. Essentially, we
Right.
are getting towards the back end of the podcast, and I
Mhm.
wanted to touch a little bit on social media, a little bit
Mhm.
with the content that you're making, the music that you're making. How do you navigate this space? Because I know we were talking a little bit off podcast about TikTok and stuff like that. Um, how challenging has it been for you to kind of take your music and try to like promote it as like a self marketer?
It's definitely been challenging, but also fun. I will say that social media is a blessing and a curse. It's very frustrating, but like I said, very fun also. I've always been a creative person. I've always loved editing photos and making video clips and adding music to things and all sorts of stuff. So now that that is um so marketable right now and so um I can't find the word, but popular, I guess. It's been helpful that like I can kind of do all these sorts of things. Um, yeah, I've kind of was doing it anyway, but now it's like okay, like people kind of care about this stuff. So I've really been trying with my content on Instagram, on TikTok, especially. Um, and I'm not always very good at it. I feel like I'm somehow missing all the trends, and I feel like a grandma, but I'm just trying to be as authentic online as possible, but also appeal to my audience. So that's always gonna be like I'm always gonna be trying to figure that out. Um, so as the waves come and go, I'll be doing what I can, but I care and pour a lot into my content. So I'm trying to be entertaining, I suppose, and marketable in all forms possible because I know that I have that ability. So if you want to follow me because you don't like my music but you like my pictures, go for it. um, yeah, I'm trying to do all the trades, I guess, while
Yeah,
I
I think that's the
can.
best way to approach it
Yeah,
though, is like you're not trying to be someone specific, you're trying to be you.
yeah,
And I think that's the best way to approach social media as someone who's fell in the trap of social media to post content to get followers.
yeah,
Like my TikTok was that for a long time, as I was telling you, and making the switch to just organically post my podcast this
yeah.
past year has been the best thing because now I'm able to kind of take the stuff that I say on my platform
Mhm.
and be able to share it online and showcase who I actually am and not this sad relationship person who's just struggling to find someone. Luckily I have an amazing girlfriend now,
Yeah.
but like that content back then did serve a purpose, and it taught me a lot of lessons about content in general
Mhm.
and social media, and it helped me cope a little bit, but it also taught me the negatives too.
Yep.
And I would be a fool not to apply those to my life currently and move forward with that.
Mhm.
So it's like you said, it's a blessing and a curse. It's here to stay as far as we know. We'll see what happens with AI and how that translates things forward. I saw that they're now
Oh,
doing video with AI, and it looks pretty real. It was kind of scary how real it looked. So we'll see how that goes. But
oh Lord.
social media is here to stay, and it's
Yep.
it's a part of what we do. So I think what you're doing with your content is probably the best case scenario, and I think you'll be very successful with it. Obviously, we're using your TikTok live and stuff and trying to engage your followers, and
Mm.
you're doing the things that you need to be doing.
Yep.
Like we talked about off air, you'll work on things that you need to work on, and I think
Yep.
ultimately you're going to get to the places that you need to get to with your content.
Yeah, I hope so.
I want to start bringing us home with this
Mhm.
podcast. I do have one more question for you regarding passion. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention? I know we're going to do like your shout your music and stuff at the end, but
No, I think I'm pretty content.
okay, good. I just don't like to skip over anything if we
Yeah,
missed
thanks.
anything. So Hope, the last question I have for you is, what would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion?
I think my best advice is if you feel so strongly about something that you can't shake the feeling for a long period of time, especially if it feels natural and it feels like it is embodied in you, then you can't run from it, even if you try. So I think that it sounds simple, but I want viewers to listen to this. You know yourself better than anyone, obviously. Listen to yourself. Desires come and go, but I think when you feel something so strongly that it embodies you as a whole and as a being, and you know that it is just who you are, like just I don't know, like you can't run from it. So you might as well pursue it. Like, I tried to kind of take a different path and I couldn't do it. Like you could have held a gun to my head and I would have been like, I'll take my chances. Like, so just listen to that feeling that you have. Definitely don't be quick to jump the gun or anything. Meditate or pray over it, but you know yourself better than anyone and have that confidence even if people don't understand it quite yet.
I think that's fantastic advice for people who want to pursue their passion, and I appreciate you not saying just go for it because I saw you,
Yeah.
you wanted to say it. It looked like right there, and it would have been fine to say right there. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to interrupt it because it was so good. And I was like, she's trying not to say it right there. And I thought
I
that was so
know.
funny. But again, I appreciate you for coming on this podcast. I
Yeah.
appreciate you for getting into the topics that we got into. I want to allow you the chance to kind of plug your music and plug your platforms.
Cool. Yeah. My name is obviously Hope Shanley. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, pretty much any platform. Google is the most efficient. It'll pop up with all my links. I just released a new song. It's called All Yours. And stay tuned for a music video for that.
Let's go. Check it out, please. I would appreciate it. Hope would appreciate it. And if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. Check it out, the Carroll Connection, notsimplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So, till next time, guys, peace.